Shabbat Shalom. Praise Yahweh. We can be together on His Shabbat again and delight ourselves in being together in His Word as we continue to be strengthened, to keep shining as we should. And today we are looking at the life of Pineḥas and the relevant Torah portion, looking at that in Eliyahu, learning some valuable lessons that are still very much alive for us today as we learn to take courage in standing up for what we need to stand up for in the Master and proclaim His truth without hindrance. So we are looking at Bemiḍbar 25, verse 10 through to 29. Verse 10 today. Is it 25, 10 to 29, 10? Is that right? 29:40. I got a wrong number up there. Thought it was a bit wrong. Okay, so from 25, verse 10. There we go. Kayla.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Pineḥas, son of Eleazar, son of Aaron the priest, has turned back my wrath from the children of Israel, because he was ardent with my ardor in their midst, so that I did not consume the children of Israel in my ardor. Therefore say, See, I am giving him my covenant of peace, and it shall be to him and to his seed after him a covenant of an everlasting priesthood, because he was ardent for his Elohim, and made atonement for the children of Israel. And the name of the man of Israel who was struck with the Midianite woman, was Zimri, son of Salu, a leader of a father's house among the Shimonites. And the name of the Midianite woman who was struck with was Cosbi, the daughter of Tsur. He was head of the people of a father's house in Midian. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Distress the Midianites, and you shall strike them, for they distressed you with their tricks with which they deceived you in the matter of Peor, and in the matter of Cosbi, the daughter of a leader of Midian, their sister, who was struck in the day of the plague because of Peor.
Okay, so this week's Torah portion is called Pineḥas. As we look at this portion, starting with the wonderful lesson that we can learn from the example of this very brave man that stood up and did what was needed to be done in a camp that had corrupted itself before the Master. And so, following on from last week's Torah portion, where we see this account of Pineḥas, who rose up and put to death the couple who had come and whored in the camp. And I know we just started with a few verses to start this Torah portion, but this is such an important piece in Scripture that is so alive for us today. And as we see the theme and the thread through this and the prophets and into the renewed writings today, teaches us valuable lessons that we are to be encouraged to stand up and speak when we need to speak. Stand up and say no when no needs to be said. I think that's such a vital lesson for us today, And Pineḥas carries such valuable lessons for us, also shadow pictures of our Master and the covenant of peace that's been given to him forever, teaching us that we have peace in our Master, and with that we're equipped with the correct knowledge of our Master to have the courage and strength to rightly handle the word of truth and speak up when we need to speak up and put to death that which needs to be put to death in our lives, so that we don't find ourselves in a place where we are in danger of being accused of compromising our worship before the Master. Now, the name of this brave priest, Pineḥas, means mouth of brass, and it's very fitting because certainly we understand that in Scripture, brass and bronze both carry the idea of judgment, and looking at the word and what the word brings, and how our Master is a righteous and just Elohim, and that righteousness and loving commitment are the foundation of his throne. And we understand that we need to be a people that are learning, studying, meditating on his word, so that we can rightly handle it and not be caught like the rest of the camp was, infiltrated by the daughters of Midian, and had corrupted their worship. This very bold and zealous priest lived up to his name. He took no nonsense. He took a spear in his hand and he thrust it through both of those who were whoring in the camp. This took skill, this took precision. He thrust it through the belly of a woman. The Hebrew word for belly is keva, which means the stomach or belly of a woman. And in essence, he basically put to death anything that would come from this. Stopped any further production of whoring in the camp, so to speak. Now, the Hebrew word for belly comes from the word kavav, which means to utter a curse against, or to blaspheme, or to curse. And this strengthens the fact that what Pineḥas did here in this action, where he put to death any curse or blasphemy that had infiltrated the camp. Remember, we looked last week at Bilam and Balak, and how Balak hired Bilam to curse Israel for him, but Yahweh would not let this false prophet do that. And so he taught Balak how to infiltrate and curse the camp another way. And so Pineḥas stands up against this whoring, and he took action when no one else would, And so when we begin this Torah portion, which is named after Pineḥas, we see how this very zealous one, this ardent one, receives a wonderful commendation from Yahweh. And it was his brave actions that actually turned back the wrath of Yahweh for Israel, upon Israel, so that they weren't utterly destroyed. After 24,000 people had died in the plague. Apologies, a bit of summer allergies coming on. Okay, let's trust that this won't interfere with our readings today. Pineḥas, commended as being ardent. The Hebrew word for ardent or zealous comes from the root word kana, which means to be jealous or zealous, to be having zeal or have ardor. And it carries the meaning of becoming intensely red in the face, as well as caused by a deep emotion. Now, ana can also be understood, or kana, it's not ana, kana can also be understood of having the meaning of an intense passion and zeal. It's shown in the pursuit of something or someone, revealing a very high level of dedication and commitment to what one has been called to. So it highlights that one is focused, super focused on doing that which is required. Now, this is a very powerful picture of the burning passion that we are to have for the truth. This is what Pineḥas actually relates for us in a great way. We also know that Pineḥas teaches us the right kind of zeal that we are to have. Now, in Scripture, the word kana can also be used in the negative context of this verb, translated at times into English as envy. Now, that's where I see kana in Hebrew, both having positive and negative, can in English give to us the highlight of the difference between zeal and being envious. We're told in Mishle 3 verse 31 that we are not to envy a cruel man and choose none of his ways. In Mishle 3 verse 17, it says, do not let your heart envy sinners, but be in the fear of Yahweh all day long. So here we see a powerful thing here, that we are warned against having the wrong kind of passion and desire for things that are not good for us. We shouldn't be desiring sinners, those who are lawless, those who are doing whatever's right in their own eyes, those who are compromising the truth. Often seems on a fleshly level, oh, it looks what they're doing is nice, oh, I'd like to do that. And we are warned not to do that. And the way we guard ourselves against that is by being in the fear of Yahweh all day long. You see, when people let go of a true reverent fear of Yahweh, that's when a wrong kind of burning passion comes into their lives, and then they resort to the things of the flesh. Now, the Hebrew word that's used in both of these verses from Mishle 3 for envy is kana. And our eyes are to be on Yahweh and his Torah, and that will guard our lives from the wrong kind of kana, the envy, the one that will get you into trouble. We are to have his Torah, as it says in Tehillah 7 verse 2, as the apple of our eye. We are to be so focused on his Torah that nothing else can cloud our judgment or our focus or our eyesight in understanding what we are to be looking to, who we are to be looking to, and what we are to be doing as fervent soldiers in the Master, armed with the truth. So Pineḥas and Eliyahu, that we're going to look at a little bit later, give us wonderful examples in Scripture for us of the zeal that we are to have. And obviously Pineḥas, as recorded in the Torah of Moshe, Eliyahu, the prophet that our Master said the spirit of Eliyahu must come first, and he likens that to Yochanan that prepared the way and must come again before our master comes, we are able to see is the Torah and the prophets that equip us to have the right kind of zeal that we are to have for our master, along with the warning of having the wrong kind of zeal. Envy, And so the wrong envy, I'd like to see in English, envy carries kind of like the negative idea, where zeal, for purposes of this teaching. So envy can cause you to make irrational choices instead of waiting on Yahweh. In Bereshit, we're given an example as we see a picture of Yosef's brothers having the wrong kind of kana, having envy. It says his brothers envied him, but his father guarded the word. Envy toward others, as opposed to a positive zeal toward Elohim, will cause one's life to rot away. Mishle 14 verse 30 says, a healthy heart is life to the body, but envy is rottenness to the bones. Shaul equates envy as one of the things that are kind of seen in the same category as it says in Galatians 5 verse 21, envy, murder, drunkenness, wild parties, and the like, of which I forewarn you, even as I also said before, that those who practice such as these shall not inherit the reign of Elohim. So we see this same root word being used to describe the passion for righteousness, along with the envy for unrighteousness. And Pineḥas displays the right kind of zeal that we are to have. Set apartness, we are clearly told in Scripture, befits the house of Elohim. And one of the lessons that we take note from this Torah portion, especially with the whoring that infiltrated the camp, is that this is such an alive mirror for us today. Because I fear that, when we look at this, I was thinking, as I was meditating on this passage, that this couple that we'll look a little bit more at shortly, but this couple that came waltzing past the tent door, as if it's okay, in the camp. I think this took a little bit of time. Balak listened to the advice of Bilam, infiltrate. So it would have been over time. It's like this slippery slope that happened over time, to the point where people in the camp actually weren't even ashamed of their lack of fear for Yahweh. And I find this is a crippling picture of where we see a falling away taking place before the lawless one is revealed. Because this isn't outsiders that have become so callous toward the fear of Yahweh, but this is people who should have a proper respect and fear for Yahweh that are walking around in front of Moshe, in front of Eleazar and Pineḥas, who actually stood up and couldn't take this nonsense anymore, and actually arrogantly go along as if everything's fine. And isn't that a picture of many claiming believers today, thinking that there's nothing wrong with what I'm doing? Meanwhile, clearly, when measured up against the plumb line of the word, what you're doing is wrong. We know that what the nations are doing in their corrupt worship. We spoke last week about the high places, and we can liken that to that which isn't in covenant, although they call false prophets and they do all things. But what about Yahweh's chosen, those who are supposed to be walking in covenant? Let's bring it closer to home, because this is an alive picture for us today. What about so many so-called Sabbath observant followers of Yeshua Messiah today? How many of them are no different to these two that were just walking in the camp, compromising as a picture of compromise and thinking it's okay? What about breaking the Sabbath? How so many today won't see a problem with not guarding the gates of Sabbath. We remember the actions that Nehemiah took when he warned those that were bringing in things to trade on the Sabbath, and he shut the gates, and he told the people, you don't open the gates. You close it before the Sabbath, and you don't open it until the Sabbath is ended. And he warned the people. Now think about many people today who they allow breaches to come in on the Sabbath. So it's not setting the Sabbath apart means setting it apart, and not allowing infiltration of that which doesn't keep the Sabbath apart to come and mix with you on the Sabbath. That's a form of what we see happening in the camp here in the days when Pineḥas stood up. We are to be envious or not envious, sorry. We are to be zealous for the things of Yahweh. We are not to be envious over other people. And to be envious means that you want something that's not yours to have, where having a zeal is actually taking the right position of what you actually have and what you want to guard, in terms of a righteous standard of set apartness. The right kind of zeal that Pineḥas had was one that wasn't a picture of being a slave to his emotions, but rather he burned with the same passion that Yahweh has for us. We see this word being used to describe where Yahweh says himself, I am a jealous El, visiting the crookedness upon the children to the third and fourth generation of those who hate him and don't love him. If we have the same zeal for Yahweh and his righteousness as he has toward us, because he sees us as the apple of his eye. He is so focused on us. He's so intently focused on us. He desires to be with us. If we have that same kind of passion and zeal, we will do our utmost to put to death all forms of compromise. And as I said earlier, it's time for us as a bride of Messiah to stand up and say no. And here's an example that was running through my head a lot. Well, a broad example that can be fit into many situations, I suppose. How about this time of year that we're in, where we know there's a lot of compromise in terms of a open, in-your-face blasphemy of worship against the master? And yet we who are set apart, no, we don't engage with that. But what about colleagues, friends, families, relatives that we know are engaging in it or don't set apart the Sabbath, but yet are calling us to compromise? And, for sake of peace, especially this time of year, and they use emotions. Most who are claiming to be ardent believers in the master aren't standing up and saying no. When you say no, it's a picture of putting to death that which should be said no to. But yet, okay, so yeah, come, okay, we'll do this with you. I know I shouldn't, but you don't understand. If I say no to them, I'm going to miss out on this, I'm going to miss out on that, we must learn to say no when it's certainly detracting us from a proper reverence for Yahweh. Did you want to share something? We are called to have the kind of passion and zeal for Yahweh at all times that Pineḥas displays, and especially in times like this. What about even outside of this times? I'm talking every week, where there will be somebody that may at times test you or be a test for you in breaking the Sabbath, bringing a breach on the Sabbath. And some people say, but it's not work, but no, Sabbath is set apart. And we need to understand, and when we understand that, it relates further to us being set apart every single day, guarding our lives from those little breaches that have a way of sneaking in, because we see that this is the way that the enemy could get into the camp of Israel. Little bit of, hey, come, let's do this. This looks like fun. Luring the people away to a point where I believe it got to a stage. I don't believe that this was one day that suddenly they were coming in, but it took a while. I don't know how long, maybe not long, but certainly long enough for it to have no consideration for how blasphemous the breaches had become. And I think a lot of people today aren't realizing how quickly something that doesn't seem so serious can actually have serious consequences. We are to have the kind of zeal that Pineḥas displays. Shaul writes to Timotheus, he writes to the believers in Corinth, he tells basically to flee from the lusts of the youth, flee from whoring. In other words, don't let it, when you flee from something, you want to get as far away from it as possible so that it won't have any kind of influence on your life. He says in 2 Corinthians, I am jealous for you with a jealousy according to Elohim. I gave you in marriage to one husband to present you as innocent maiden to Messiah. He was basically saying, listen, the reason I'm sharing these things with you is because I actually have a jealousy for you as I do for Yahweh, so that you are not corrupted. And so I've given you the truth to be set apart to Yahweh. Don't mess that up and give yourself over to compromise because a family member says, hey, I'm going to come, or hey, I can do this, or come and do this with me, and you feel like you can't. When you should stand up. Today's message, I believe, is we should stand up and say no when no should be said. And if it means you lose relationships because of it, our master tells us this will happen. I think a lot of people fear people rather than Elohim. And that's a big problem. And I think this is what happened here as it slowly infiltrated the camp to the point where right before the door of the tent of appointment, which represents in many ways the appointments of Yahweh, where it was being scoffed at. When we have zeal for the house, we'll keep the house clean. We'll keep it set apart. We, as the dwelling place of Elohim, have a responsibility to make sure that the house keeps the rules, the house keeps the boundaries intact, and each does its part to guard the unity of the Spirit, especially on our appointments with our Master. And so we are the dwelling place of Yahweh, and when we have zeal for his dwelling place, we'll make sure that the rules aren't broken, that the boundaries are kept intact. We think of when Nehemiah, in the days of rebuilding the walls, and they stationed each person from gate to gate, and they were there, one hand with a trowel fixing the wall, the other hand with the weapon, ready to, make sure that no breaches could be had by the enemy. And when we have a zeal for the house, as I said, we look at the words of David in Tehillah 69, verse 89, he says, 8:2-9, he says, I have become a stranger to my brothers and a foreigner to my mother's children, because ardor for your house has eaten me up. And the reproaches of those who reproach you have fallen on me. So what is he saying here? He says, because I have such a zeal for your house, which means I'm going to guard your house, I've actually become a stranger to my family, because I'm not giving in to their whims. I'm not giving in to their pressures for me to break what I should be guarding. And their reproaches have fallen on me. It's like they'll speak evil of you. But David says, it's because I have ardor for your house. And we know these words of David in this psalm were echoed by our master, And in Tehillah 119, I believe Ezra wrote this at the time of the rebuilding of the walls, etc. Verse 139, it says, my ardor has consumed me, for my adversaries have forgotten your word. So we see some wonderful lessons in Scripture. Last week we looked at how Lot was tormented by the lawlessness that he saw. And this actually is something that should rise up in us to cause us to be on guard against compromise, so that we are so zealous for doing what's right. Some may see it as trying to be legalistic, as trying to be too strict. I'd rather be ardent. There we go. I always get it wrong. No, not arduous. I'd rather be ardent and be labeled as being strict than one who has let down their guard and seen as everything's acceptable. Just because we can now make sure we're not losing friends or relationships. Now, I'm not out here to preach you must lose every relationship you have. I'm here to teach you to guard the zeal for Yahweh, which may cause you to lose relationships. Our master warned us of this. When our ardor for his house, which we are collectively together, eats us up, then we realize that we will become strangers to our families. I'm talking blood relatives in the flesh. The Hebrew word for consumed is tzamath. When I believe Ezra saying his ardor consumed him, it means to put an end to exterminate, to destroy, to consume. And while this word kind of emphasizes a clear extermination, we take note how much lawlessness of the enemies of the true servant of Yahweh has caused true believers to be actually so ardent that they don't want anything to do. It's actually when you don't hate that which Yahweh hates, that will actually eat you up. But rather, zeal for his house will eat you up to the point where you don't want to be associated with it, especially this time of year where we see all this stuff. It's like, I don't want it near me. But yet people think, for sake of relationships, we must tolerate it. And that's the Isabel spirit that tolerates evil. And this is what we are cautioned to be on guard against in the Master. We need to be challenged every single day in our walk of set apartness before the Master. So many people have conveniently forgotten Yahweh's words. In fact, I think sometimes believers And this is a mirror so that we can see a true repentance taking place. Many times, believers will actually willfully disregard Yahweh's command to guard the Sabbath. They knowingly make choices they know they shouldn't make, but they justify in themselves, how else can I? How can I refuse X, Y, and Z? You can fill in the pictures of examples that you have there. But this is where we are seeing this call. Hear the word and what the Spirit is saying. It's time for true, ardent believers to stand up. And again, I say no when no needs to be said. Too many, we've been brought up in a culture in the world where if you say no, you know, it's wrong. Our master said, let your yes be yes and your no, no. Anything beyond that is from the devil. Many people can't claim to be very zealous for Yahweh, yet they'll quickly cut corners and allow compromise to go unchallenged. And don't confront the mixed lukewarm worship that's carrying on by so many others. And they also don't want to be confronted in their lives. So you know what? When you start seeing people who should be in the body together start distancing themselves, having less communication, maybe it's a sign of, you know, if I have more communication, the light's going to shine and I'm going to be asked questions. Why am I doing this? Why am I not doing that? And sadly, they're partaking in lukewarm worship themselves. It sounded a bit weird as it came off my lips. When our zeal for Yahweh and his word consumes us, then we'll be like the Pineḥases of today that won't for a moment turn a blind eye or kind of see it, feel it's wrong, but you know, people. And then when you do that enough, it doesn't seem wrong anymore. Zeal for Yahweh consumed Eliyahu. We're going to look at that a little bit later. And I believe from the patterns that we are able to see in Scripture is that when our master said the true worshippers will worship the master in spirit and truth, this is now. This is what it's calling for. Pineḥas stood up. He couldn't put up with what was going on in the camp any longer, which I mean, it must have been going on for a while. People who claim to be worshipping Elohim, but clearly by their lives, you see that they're riddled. Pineḥas, the grandson of Aharon, he was sick and tired of the blatant disregard for Yahweh and neglecting to be obedient to his Torah. And many people today will use excuses like, oh yeah, you're trying to be too strict. We can't be so strict. You know, oh, come on, we've got to accept them. They're our brothers. I was reminded earlier this week of the passages that we've been through over the last couple of months as going through our journey in Bemiḍbar, or the wilderness accounts, when Moshe stood up and told the rest of the congregation to move away from the tents of Korah. It was for good reason, because they would have been destroyed. And as we see in this Torah portion, some of the sons of Korah exactly did that. And so we see that we can't have this broad description, oh, we're all brothers. If a guy is not operating in obedience, then you know what? We're told in the renewed writings, you can go and present your case if there's something that you see. And if they don't listen to you, go and get others. If they don't listen to the witnesses, go and before the congregation. If they still don't, you treat him as a tax collector, as a sinner. In other words, he's not a brother anymore. Move away. Joel says, and he warns Timotheus to turn away from those who have a form of reverence but don't actually contain the proper power of the zeal that true reverent ones should have. You know, with mouth of brass, the meaning of Pineḥas, and his father's name Eleazar, which means Ella's helped, and Aharon the light bringer, we see as a set-apart people in our master, our high priest and king, as his body, we are reminded to be able to stand up, speak the truth, shine the light, knowing that we have El as our helper in order to know what words we need to speak and be confident enough to speak them when we need to. How many of you are sick and tired of the blatant disregard that so many have for Yahweh in the world today, perhaps even within the body today? I remind you that most of the renewed writing letters that are written to believers. It's not written to outsiders. And this is a wake-up call at times, because often people tend to see these letters as speaking of those that are outside a covenant, but it's a warning to those inside covenant, you know? And so when we see everything else other than Yahweh being worshipped today, and that by claiming believers. What are we doing about it? In the midst of this darkness that's getting thicker and thicker each day as the day of our Master draws near, the desperate need for us to be consistent in our loving obedience to the Master must be the focus of our lives as we shine the light and calling those who truly fear Yahweh to remain being zealous for him. Rise up, take a stand. One of the things that we see when I said how Yahweh said he's very jealous, we see in Shemot 34 the following, when he says from verses 11, says, guard what I command you today. See, I am driving out from before you the Amorite, the Canaanite, the Hittite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, and the Jebusite. Guard yourself, lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land where you are going, lest it be a snare in your midst. But break down their slaughter places, smash their pillars, cut down their asherim. For you do not bow yourself to another mighty one, for Yahweh, whose name is jealous, is a jealous El. Lest you make a covenant with the inhabitants of the land, and you whore after their mighty ones, and slaughter to their mighty ones, and one of them invites you to eat of his slaughterings, and you take of his daughters for your sons, and his daughters whore after their mighty ones, and make your sons whore after their mighty ones. Do not make a molded mighty one for yourselves. Now this he was talking when he was going to drive out all the ites. They haven't even crossed the Yarden yet, and they're already doing this. These words that were spoken to Moshe by Yahweh make it very clear how Yahweh is very jealous for us. And he doesn't want to allow anything else other than him being worshipped in our lives. And so this is a call to get rid of every kind of envy or desire to follow the ways that many are following in a lukewarm presentation of worship, because they will just get vomited out. Israel were completing their last year in the wilderness. I mean, this is like they're almost at the end of 40 years, which Yahweh said that's the time they're going to be in the wilderness. So you've got people sitting on the brink of entering into the promise that was given. You would think for a moment, the journey in the wilderness was almost over. The land of promise was just across the river. They could physically see it. Before they would go across, in this Torah portion, we're also told Moshe would get to see the land, but not enter in it. So it was visible. It was there. You can see it. Over 1 million adults that had left Mitzrayim were now dead. It was 603,000 people, men that were registered to fight. Now, as we see, many of them came out. We know that of those, everyone 20 years old and above, except Yehoshua and Caleb, were now dead, except Moshe, who was about to go. He wouldn't enter in. So they were about to go. You would think, when you look at history and you'd think, wow, what's Yahweh done? They'd seen how he'd destroyed their enemies, how he had recently destroyed Sichon and Og, how the rebellion in the camp had been dealt with miraculous things happening, when the earth opening up and swallowing the rebellious who tried to take charge and bring down Yahweh's appointed. So all these things that happened, they'd seen how people were bit by snakes, and those who didn't look to that which Moshe made died, but those who did. So all of this should bring about, not long before this, the enemy saw them. Bilam said, this is an unsuspecting people. They've got the shout of a sovereign in them. And how quickly that shout of a sovereign had been quietened in the minds and hearts of so many, to the point where what was outside the camp was more interesting to them, that they said this could be part of our camp. And that's a danger that so many people face today. You'd think that you should go into the camp at this stage if you could go historically back in time, and you'd think that there should have been the proper rejoicing, the joy and celebration, the noise of set apartness to the Master. But yet, what do we see in Scripture? The deafening sound of whoring going on. you know. The opposite of true service to the master was happening. Pineḥas stands up and displays his love for Yahweh, his total obedience to Yahweh, while the majority of the camp were disregarding the commands of Elohim. We know, Yochanan tells us, this is love for Elohim when we walk according to his commands. And therefore we understand having true zeal for him means guarding his commands. Shaul tells us to be ardent in spirit. In Romans 12, verse 11, he says, we shouldn't be idle in duty, ardent in spirit, serving the master. Now, the Greek word for ardent is zeo, which means to be hot, to be fervent, have a zeal either for that which is good or bad, because it can go positive or negative. We've discussed that. And it's the equivalent to the Hebrew word kana. We also understand where the word zealous comes from, that Greek word, you know. And so we understand how so many people may be claiming to be zealous for Yahweh, but their actions show that they're allowing compromise, which actually means that their envy for things that they shouldn't have is actually ruling their lives. One can be hot or zealous for that which is good or evil. We see in the book of Micah, where Yahweh rebukes Israel. And in Micah 7, verse 2 to 3, it says, the kind one, or the lovingly committed one, has perished from the earth. There is no one straight among men. All of them lie in wait for blood. Everyone hunts his brother with a net. Both hands are on the evil to do it well. The prince asks for gifts, the judge seeks a bribe, and the great man speaks the desire of his being. And they weave it together. So bribery and corruption, hands doing it evil well, all mixed in together, that becomes the standard, the assumed standard of what's accepted. Yahweh doesn't change. His righteousness and his standards for righteousness and set apartness are the same yesterday, today, and forever. You know, Shaul says in Romans 12, verse 9, let love be without hypocrisy, shrink from what is wicked and cling to what is good. In other words, have both hands on the good to do it well. Our hands speak of our work and our walk with the master in doing his commands. You know, as we mentioned in last week's Torah portion, Baal Peor could be translated as the master of the opening, the wide way, or even more appropriately put for us today, the Lord of the wide way, or the Lord of destruction, understanding that Baal is, as a title, could be a clear reference to the root title that we get today as Lord, because Yahweh is not the Lord. He is our Elohim, he is our master. We prefer not to use the English term Lord, as it diminishes the esteem that we are to bring to our master, bringing it down to either a corrupt version of worshipping that which should not be worshipped, or attributing that to what man attributes power to, as in terms of landowner, where many are given the title of lords, as we know from the British Empire. Peor, meaning wide, that was the name of a mountain in Moab. It was also that which was worshipped in the high places. So this Baal Peor worship that Hosea reminds us of and remarks about these events that took place at Baal Peor is that it highlights for us where the Israelites defiled themselves with abundance of fornication and sexual perversion by following the corrupt ways of the Moabites, leading them astray. So this is a picture of the broad path to destruction, and it starts very subtly. Our master warns us against the broad path that leads to destruction, and he says we are to strive to enter through the narrow gate, which few find. Now, the Greek word that's translated as wide in our master's instructions to guard against going this wide way is platus, which means the broad street or the broad way. And the Greek word for broad is eurokoros, which means broad or spacious. And this word is actually used in the Septuagint in Hosea 4, verse 16, where Israel is described as being stubborn, like a stubborn calf. And it said, would Yahweh now feed them like a lamb in a broad place? So the prophet is highlighting, calling Ephraim to come back and saying, listen, you're being stubborn. You're being like a stubborn calf that doesn't want to do what it should be doing. So therefore, do you think Yahweh is going to feed you like a lamb in a broad place? Yahweh's not feeding you in the broad place. So the broad many way approach, Yahweh's not feeding anybody there with his manna, with his word. They're feeding themselves on ashes, that which does not profit. And so the Hebrew word for broad place is merchav. It means a broad or roomy place or large field. Comes from the verb rachav, and it's from this root word that we get the word that's described as a proud heart in Mishle 21 verse 4, when it says a haughty look, a proud heart, the lamp of the wrong are sin. Now the Hebrew phrase proud heart is urchav lev, which comes from lev, which is the inner man, the inner thoughts, the will, translated as heart, and rachav, coming from the verb, which means to grow wide or extend. So in other words, it's almost like people want such a big heart to everything. Well, Yahweh says his Torah is to be on our heart. And when people have the big heart, it's normally actually a sign of being very arrogant and full of pride, where, no, you can't tell people what to do. No, I don't want to tell any outsider what to do. But anybody who claims to be part of the body, we are required to be telling each other what we should be doing and holding each other accountable, lest we find ourselves having such a wide heart that accepts everything. A proud heart, a broad heart, is an idiomatic expression for arrogance. It teaches us of the dangers of the broad and many way, the acceptance of many things. We are to be people that saying, this is the way we live. We say no to that. We say no to that, even if it offends people. This is a picture, having a broad heart is a picture of people being so arrogant and saying that they do not have to guard everything in the Torah, but follow whatever path suits their situation. So as long as it benefits me to keep the Sabbath, I'll keep the Sabbath. This is how some approach it. But when I see something beneficial for me, because then I'll allow this to happen because, he knows my heart. Isn't that the thing that Yirmiyahu warns us against? A proud heart is a picture of one who rebels against complete obedience to the Torah of Elohim. Yeshayahu says in chapter 13, verse 11, I shall punish the world for its evil and the wrong for their crookedness, and I shall put an end to the arrogance of the proud and lay low the proud of the ruthless. So there's a destruction coming from Yahweh. Baal worship, as pictured here, that corrupted at this Baal Peor event, is a picture of giving over to the free reign of the flesh and the carnal nature, which includes gluttony, drunkenness, and whoring away from the master. And this is the kind of worship that became established as a unified worldly way of worship that many are engaged in this season. Because there are many who actually don't claim any religious connotation to scriptural events at all, but yet they'll still be bound by the Baal worship of Christmas and Easter and all the fertility worship and pagan idolatry that comes with it, because it literally is idolatry, and we're not engaged in that at all. Pineḥas is a clear picture of standing up amidst the idolatrous ways and putting it to death, not letting it infiltrate the camp anymore. When Pineḥas stood up, he was ardent for Yahweh. So he didn't just stand up for himself, he stood up for Yahweh. Now, it's not like Yahweh needs us to stand up for him, because Yahweh can deal with his enemies very clearly. But he is searching, looking for those that he can show himself strong on behalf of. He wants to see, when we see in the Psalms crying out that there's no righteous one anymore, it's kind of like a sad picture. Pineḥas was trained and skilled in weaponry. Obvious. To take a spear and thrust it through two people takes courage and skill, accuracy. When we need to deliver the word, we can't go there. Picture yourself when Shaul says that he reminds us how we should present ourselves as workmen approved, knowing how to rightly handle the word of truth. Now, you can only know how to handle it when you're being taught right by the right appointed ones, and that you're growing in that knowledge because you're meditating on it day and night. It becomes the apple of your eye, so you're not getting corrupted by other things that can weave its way in, if not guarded against. then you can rightly handle the sharper double-edged sword of our master as opposed to the sharp edge of the whore that tries to corrupt and kill. Then we realize that it's important that we become skilled. And skill takes continual, diligent learning and practice so that we guard to do what our master commands us to do with skill, so that when it comes to displaying that skill, we are always ready to give a reason for the hope that we have, and we can exercise his word with precision. You know, a lot of people today claim to have zeal for Yahweh, but they don't know the word. And that's where they get caught by the enemy. And they and they and they And they should be teachers by now, but they still need the milk of the word. Why? Because they've allowed compromise to be a standard of their assumed worship before the master. And this is something that we must be on guard against, you know. I want to tell you, to take a stand for the truth takes precision. To use the word that cuts right down to divide between bone and marrow, it gets to the life of the matter. And when you use the word with precision, you might not always be very popular. Don't expect accolades or applause from men. Expect mockery, expect slander, expect coarse laughter, even bitterness and hatred. Expect that from those that don't like what you're sharing according to the truth of the word. Know this, our reward is not with men. Our reward is in the heavens, and our master is coming to reward those that are as ardent for his truth as he is. Wouldn't it be nice to hear our Father say to us when he comes to fetch his bride, "You are as zealous as I am for my esteem"? This is what he was saying about Pineḥas. Yahweh is waiting for his true bride to stand up and take a firm stand, armed in his truth. When we go through this whole Torah portion, I'm focusing on this small intro as I believe this is the main focus that sets the tone for this entire week's reading that we're looking at. Let me ask you the following today. Will you arise and burn with the zeal for Yahweh's esteem, be bold and courageous to declare his truth as you see continual sin and lawlessness all around you, as you see the corrupt Baal worship going on in the lives of even many believers? Will you take a stand for his Torah, to live it, declare it, to teach it, as you zealously expose the lies of the enemy and drawing people back to a clear and pure worship to Elohim? Will you in your own life put to death and kill the misdeeds of the flesh and help others to do the same? Because you see, this, what we are speaking today, is the Eliyahu message that needs to be spoken and heard. I say that because Eliyahu was as zealous for Yahweh as Pineḥas was when he confronted Baal worship and caused people to make a choice. You know, we must endeavor to be amongst the remnant few that walk this path of zeal. It's time to rise up. It's time to take a stand. And if you are already standing and speaking the truth, great. Don't lose that zeal. You know, be reminded of Yahweh's words to a very kind of, at first, unsure man when he was called by Yahweh to take a stand, Gideon. And Yahweh called him mighty brave one. And he had to go and destroy stuff that his father had set up. Walk in true zeal for Yahweh. And if we stop and think about it for a moment, there are people out there dying, and what are we doing about it? Arise, shine, for your light has come. There is darkness over the earth, thick darkness over the peoples, but the Spirit of Yahweh, his light shines on us. What are we doing? Are we guarding that light by keeping oil in our lamps, by, walking according to the Spirit, or are we just letting our lamps run dry because of compromise? When we think of this zeal, Yochanan 2 gives us again an account of our master when he was showing the zeal he had for his house that he builds his way, and what had become corrupt in the temple service. He made it very clear. In Yochanan 2 verse 14 to 17, he says, he found in the set apart place those selling oxen and sheep and doves and the money changers sitting. And having made whips of cords, he drove them out of the set-apart place with the sheep and oxen, and poured out the money changers' coins and overturned the tables. And he said to those selling doves, take these away. Do not make the house of my father a house of merchandise. And his taught ones remembered that it is written, the ardor for your house has eaten me up. You see, what he saw, he didn't come along and go, oh, yeah, sure, look what they're doing. Oh, it's okay. We'll hopefully reach them. We'll hopefully get them to see. No, he went and he caused a great big stir. I mean, to have somebody walk in there and start chasing people out, chasing animals out, turning over the money. It's not like he went in to rob them, because he took the coins and he threw them out. How zealous are you for the house of Elohim? How zealous are we? That's the question that whenever we go through this Torah portion, we should be asking ourselves. You may get confronted. No, you're trying to be too strict. Don't let that get you down. As long as you in your own life are making sure that there's no planks in your eye, that you are able to see clearly as a witness of set-apart living before others, you can take a stand and know that Yahweh is the one who is your defender. He will fight for you, but he's calling for you to make a declaration and take a stand. Pineḥas was given the promise of a covenant of peace. He was literally given the shalom of Yahweh as an everlasting covenant. How awesome is that? We know shalom carries great wealth of insight for us into understanding it's more than just a bit of peace. It represents safety, well-being. It represents prosperity, completeness, soundness, protection, full restitution. And being rewarded with Yahweh's shalom is something that gives us strength to continue standing in him as we wait for his soon return. Tehillah 119, verse 165, it says, great peace, great shalom have those loving your Torah, and for them there's no stumbling block. So here comes a kind of pretty important key. When people are stumbling in their walk, it shows they don't really love the Torah. And you know how you know when people don't really love the Torah? When they say they don't need to hear the Torah anymore. So what about the pattern that we've been speaking of many times for the standard of our gathering on the Sabbath, where Moshe is read, where the Torah is read? And many people who are gathering on the Sabbath actually don't love the Torah because they don't want Moshe being read and explained. Believe you me, there's stumbling blocks in their lives, because when you love the Torah, there's no stumbling block. The one steadfast of mind you guard in perfect peace, for he trusts in you. Yeshayahu 26 verse 3. And here the words perfect peace is actually a repetition of shalom, shalom, shalom. In Hebrew it's yetzer samuch titzor shalom shalom ki v'cha batuach. It literally means he whose mind is steadfast in you is kept in perfect peace because in you he trusts. How awesome is that? When we have the perfect peace. So when we say to people shalom, shalom, it's not because we're stuttering. It's actually a reflection of the desire for us to have that perfect shalom of our Master, because the complete trust that we have in him, knowing that we who stand up and are zealous for Yahweh shall not lack any good matter. And there won't be a stumbling block for us. The stumbling block can be likened to those things that are trying to trip you up in your set-apartness before the Master. And Pineḥas represents a type or a picture of Messiah who by his actions appeased the wrath of Elohim. Appeased the wrath of Elohim. And he gives them this powerful covenant of shalom, an everlasting covenant, which teaches us that we in the Master, when Shaul says in Romans 5 verse 1, we have peace with Elohim, then we understand this is covenant language that he's calling people back to. And he's warning the believers in Rome not to be corrupted by Roman ways. Guard the zeal for the covenants of promise that we have been grafted into. This wasn't a brand new covenant that Yahweh was giving. He was establishing as part of the covenants of promise a clear character trait of those who are in covenant with him. That when you are in covenant with him, he will guard you. And as long as you stay in him, as our Master says, he will stay in us. This is part of the covenant of everlasting shalom that we are given as a set-apart bride in our high priest and king in the order of Melchizedek. The bold actions of Pineḥas teach us a valuable lesson of the redemptive work that our Master has brought to us, and therefore our responsibility in guarding our lives in his perfect shalom. And perfect shalom requires one to put trust in Yahweh, not in man. And when people begin to let go of their trust in Yahweh, they begin to run to the ways of man to try and gain some kind of relationships that won't be broken, and they corrupt their ways. And this is what this mirror of the word today is reminding us of, what we are to be on guard against. We have our master who's made atonement for us. And part of the idea, as we understand, I'm not going to go in depth into atonement, but we understand we're covered. Covered in the blood of our master. Don't break that covering. Now let's look at the two that came into the camp and the lessons we can learn from that. Is there anything you wanted to share before? Okay. The name of the Israelite man who was struck with the Moabite woman was Zimri, which means my music. And he was the son of Salu, which means weighed or made light of. And so Zimri was actually weighed and found wanting. In other words, against the standard of set apartness in front of the tent of meeting, he was found to not measure up to the righteous standard of set apartness. And we should recognize that Zimri was from Shimon. Now, he was a Shimonite. Now, unless he was bringing an offering, he shouldn't have been in that area. Remember, the Levites were encamped around, and Moshe and Aharon, now Eleazar, and their tents with Pineḥas were on the east side by the gate. So unless one was literally bringing an offering, they shouldn't have been in that area. And here comes this Zimri mincing along with his feet, with his corrupt Moabite woman, and arrogantly walking past this set-apart place, as if what they're doing is fine. And when we think of my music, we understand the power of music and how influential it can be in people's lives. And, you know, music is a very powerful tool. We see Yahweh using the Levites and David appointing for service those who would lead in the worship, very importantly so, because that would be which causes people to enter into Yahweh's presence. It reminds us of the continual praise that surrounds the throne. As I've mentioned before, the book of Chazon, besides the Psalms, has more written about worship than any other book in Scripture. And often people think, what? You know, it's because of lack of understanding. They don't understand the celebration and worship that the revelation of Messiah is showing us. So music and worship has a very critical role, and the enemy knows that too. And in our day and age, I mean, back then, there was this picture of corrupt music coming in the camp because it wasn't the sound of belief. It was the sound of compromise. Today, we are warned. I've said many times that this is creeping in to the body at a rapid rate, where AI is taking over worship. And it shouldn't be so, because it's not the breath that Yahweh is calling to praise him. Because AI does not have Yahweh's breath, okay? In fact, AI is not a person. It's a product of programming, and it's not real people having the breath that is to be brought to Yahweh in praise. So we must be on guard as a set-apart people to not allow AI to be directing our worship. David appointed people to direct the worship on behalf. And so therefore we must understand that worship is a critical part of our entrance into our Master's presence. Okay. The name of the woman that came with Zimri was Cosbi. Cosbi means my lie. And she was a daughter of a leader in Midian whose name was Tsur, which means rock. And what we have here, because we understand our Yahweh is our rock, Tsuri means my rock, and as well as Sali, also the two Hebrew words. So here you've got a picture of the counterfeit rock, not the real rock, if you will, you know. So here's a classic picture of the false bride who portrays herself as the real thing, but all she is a lie from the father of lies. And so she says that she's from the rock, but it's not from Yahweh, it's from another rock. And Yahweh says he knows no other rock, that he is the rock of our deliverance. The false Messiah, because this is a picture of the anti-Messiah, and his congregation are built on man-driven practices that have corrupted a purity of worship. And it's been Hellenized into adopting pagan practices, especially this time of year. I mean, let's call a spade a spade. You know, the anti-Messiah spirit, the anti-Messiah rock, if you will, has modernized the constructed, Hellenized name of Jesus Christ as its leader, and it's leading people away. And that's not Yeshua, our Savior. Now, I know this might offend people. Do you think when Pineḥas stood up and put to death, he was afraid of offending anybody? He was concerned about the integrity, the character, and the witness of Yahweh that we are to be standing up and boldly defending. Not that Yahweh needs our ability to defend himself, but we are to be a character witness as a set-apart bride that doesn't allow a corruption of who he is, being as we are to carry his name and represent his name in everything we do. And bringing in corrupted titles and names diminishes the witness into something that brings whoring into the camp. And so there are many groups today that are keeping Sabbath and feasts, but they're bringing in the music of whoring with corrupted titles and corrupted names and saying it's okay, and everybody's feasting together. And this is time where the true Pineḥases need to stand up and put that to death and say this is not tolerable in the house of Yahweh. Need to start turning over people's tables, so to speak, on a spiritual level. You know? The religious counterfeits hate the fact that the remnant is standing up and calling on the true name. Now, there's a nice account that we're given in the book of Acts in chapter 17, you know, because when the word was spreading, people didn't like this word. In chapter 17, verse 6 to 7, it says, but not finding them, because they were searching for Shaul and Barnabas, they wanted to destroy them. And it says, they dragged Jason and some of the brothers to the city rulers, crying out, they who have turned the world upside down have come here too, whom Jason has received. And all of them are acting contrary to the dogmas of Caesar, saying there's another sovereign, Yeshua. Hear what they were saying here. It's very clear. They were saying these people are coming in and they're not going according to the Roman way. There's another king, Yeshua. It's not Caesar. Just like Pineḥas and the early believers, in a sense, we are to be turning the world upside down wherever we find ourselves, you know? And how ready are we to be doing that? Now, we're not going out literally, they're saying they're turning our world upside down. And you know what? We are just speaking the truth. And here, Yahweh makes it very clear, because of what had happened in the camp, he says to Moshe, you tell the people, you distress the Midianites. The Hebrew word for distress, tsarar, means to bind up, restrict, be restricted, frustrate, trouble, make narrow, or encamp. In other words, they were to not give room to the Midianites to infiltrate their camp. And this on a literal level means it should have no part in your life. It should not even be a consideration. The understanding here is to make them so tight and make it so hard for them to breathe that they have no effect on you. It might seem this instruction for many in a corrupted system today, or a mixed system which is still corrupt, it might seem unchristian-like or unbeliever-like, because some might say, oh no, you can't be like that. No. This is what Yahweh's will is, that we distress that which causes division. The Midian means strife. And we are not to give place for that, because strife comes in when you allow a little bit of compromise. And you allow that to be tolerated, and it becomes a standard that's accepted. So people don't even blink when they see wrong things happening in fellowships. And this is where we are now told to say it's time that we start getting the house clean, as pictured by our master. You know, when he turned the money changers tables, what people don't understand, they set themselves up. Anybody that came up to the feasts, and you lived far away, it would be quite far for you to bring your animal offerings. So you were allowed to bring money, and you were allowed to buy in Jerusalem what you would be offering at the temple. But that buying was to be taking place in the marketplace. The temple was not the marketplace. Where they had set up their tables, where they had set up the marketplace was known as the court of the nations, or the court of the Gentiles, where people coming should be able to hear the word and be encouraged to want to be part of that. So they turned this into a business where it should have been a prayer for the nations, because Israel was supposed to be a light to the nations. And so the tolerance of evil is what our master came to overturn and say, get proper service back where it should be, you know. Yahweh said the Midianites distressed you with their tricks. Now you need to distress them. You need to give them no room. How they took your breath out of you was by their trickery. The Hebrew word for tricks is nachal, which means to be crafty, to swindle, or to deceive. So when Bilam couldn't curse from the hilltops, he taught Balak how to be very crafty and distress them with trickery and, you know, flattery, saying nice words. How did these women get into a camp of unsuspecting people? By slowly luring them away and then infiltrating the camp. It's time to stand up, as I said a couple of times today, and say no. You know? No to compromise. No to whoring. No to double standards. And in order to know what the standard is, we need to have ears to hear what the Torah is saying every week where Moshe is read, and be equipped so that we know how to rightly handle the sword, so we can, in our own lives, put to death anything that tries to set itself up against Messiah.
Cheating is obviously the area where Reuben, Manasseh, and God stayed.
Yes.
And I think, you know, because we read it in a certain order, you don't always get the picture. But, I mean, they obviously stayed long there, and that's why the warring started happening, where he always said, they're going to be pricks in your eyes, thorns in your sides.
Yeah.
But I feel like people start, if you dwell long enough among the nations, when you're small and you don't know what you're doing, and you're naughty, you get a hiding, it trains you. Because sometimes, you don't have the reason yet to understand, so a smack on the bum is the only thing that makes you realize what you did was wrong.
Yeah.
So when you're a grown-up, you don't get hidings anymore, because you should be able to discern the right and the wrong. I feel like that sometimes they were the leaders that dwelt long in the wilderness. They should know Yahweh. They were part of the nation that he said we weren't going to enter in. But you get older, you get mature in a sense, and you start, and Yahweh isn't going to force you to love.
Mm-mm.
So if you willfully go against him, he's going to let you go. He's not even going to discipline you anymore, because you're a grown-up.
Yeah.
And I think that's the danger.
Yes.
Is we get to the point where he will give you over, because we know when they said we want to stay here, we've got flocks, we don't want to go over, this is good for. He said yes.
Because you could see in their hearts already.
I mean, he's force you to love him. He's going to eventually give you over to the desires of your heart.
Yeah.
And then you're going to think, oh, yeah, okay, it's fine. But I mean, because he sees what's in there, he's not going to bother trying to discipline you anymore after a while.
Yes.
I mean, he still sends his prophets. Still warns, but he can't force you.
No.
You're an adult. You're a mature person. No man, no human can force another human to love them.
Yeah.
And Yahweh doesn't do that either. He doesn't want, we're not robots.
Yeah.
He wants us to want to love him.
Yes.
And for me, that's like when we see people who are proclaiming to keep the Sabbath, proclaiming to obey the word, willfully going against it. Like, he's going to give you over to that. Mm-hmm. You're going to think it's fine.
Yes.
Because he's not going to force you.
Yeah.
But it's not going to go well. But the sad part is, because he doesn't discipline you, you're getting away with it. You think it's okay.
Yes.
Because he gave you what you wanted.
Yeah.
But in the end, but even in that, he still sends people. And I think that's the point with Pineḥas. If we break an hour of the Sabbath, we've broken the Sabbath, contaminated ourselves.
Yes.
We're not clean anymore.
Yeah.
And that's what people don't get. And these guys wouldn't put up with it. We shouldn't either, because if you turn a blind eye, if you don't say, it affects your life.
Yes.
And I mean, then everyone's contaminated.
Then your presentation of worship is defiled and not acceptable.
So because you sometimes sometimes get people to say, oh, we're all brothers, you must just make peace and just get along and don't, But I mean, what's the point of that? There's nothing. The enemies will be people from your own household.
Yeah.
How do they not see that you're supposed to not tolerate this stuff?
Yeah.
You're supposed to be like Pineḥas to say, I'm not going to let you affect and infect my life because I want to be with Yahweh. I want to go over the ark and I want to get into the promised land.
Yes.
I won't stay this side because I think, okay, well, I've come far enough. This is fine.
Yeah.
I'm okay.
Yeah.
Being saved out of slavery. I don't really want to go into the presence of Yahweh. Now, that's the danger. And it becomes very sad when people feel like, okay, well, everyone must just do whatever is right in their own eyes. When he gives you over to the desires of your heart, that's a very dangerous place.
Yeah. This is such a serious Torah portion because Pineḥas has a twofold, or manifold lessons for us, if you will. But on the one sense, it's Pineḥas being so zealous for Yahweh that's why he did what he did. And he was willing to put to death what needed to be put to death because he wanted to retain. Because when one part suffers, the whole part suffers. So if it was just tolerated, a plague had started in the camp. And he said, I can't have this plague because I'm going to be affected by this plague. So I'm going to stand up and get the boundaries in place. And this is a lesson for us today. We can't be compromising. I like what Karlina's saying. If you compromise an hour for the Sabbath, you've broken the whole Sabbath. I mean, that can be, we could go into a whole list of examples, but that's not what we're trying to do here. But we are highlighting. When people are infiltrating, let's say like this. Some people might think, okay, well, let's just get practical. Okay, so we've joined in with Craig, not that I'm anything special, but we've joined in with Craig for a couple of hours until lunch. After lunch, well, hey, you know what? I could go and meet so-and-so, or so-and-so can come here, or this can happen, or, maybe we can do that. And now you bring in that which is not set apart into a set-apart environment. What you thought you did and made yourself feel good about is broken. It's rendered it as unacceptable before the master, So when you think that, oh no, I did a good sacrifice, but then you weren't obedient. And that's where Yahweh says, I desire obedience over sacrifice. Obedience will bring the necessary sacrifice, as we look in this Torah portion. So we need to understand how important it is for us to not defile our worship because others around us are actually creeping in, and it's a process of time. That's what we've discussed here. It's like, I think Pineḥas was never affected. But it came from the outskirts, and it came to the point where it was right there in front of the tent of appointment. People who shouldn't have been there coming arrogantly past, and as if, and isn't that how some people keep the Sabbath when they feel like keeping it any other way somebody's told them? And then they arrogant. No, I don't need to do this way. I don't need a pattern. I'll do my own pattern. Don't tell me what to do. And they're arrogant about it. And this is something I feel is what's a thread of a warning that Yahweh gives in his Torah and threaded through the prophets, but yet so many people are actually blind and deaf to hearing what the Spirit is saying, and then they're constructing their own kind of theology to appease themselves and think, look how good I've done, And so we need to realize how serious this is. And on the other side, this is an encouragement for those that are as zealous, that are actually being tormented by the rubbish that's going on within the body. But don't lose that zeal. That's the encouragement. We look at Eliyahu a bit later. I'm the only one left. Today we're encouraged. We're not the only ones left. And we should be encouraged by that. Because yes, it feels like we're alone. This little boy bobbing in the waves all alone. And, you're not alone. Buoy. Boy is right. Isn't it buoy, boy? Okay, you get what maybe you all thought a little boy. No, that buoy. That's, sometimes it feels the waves going and you're this only thing here. But you know what? You're that beacon for many. So we can continue for hours and hours on the zeal of Pineḥas, and I'd love to do that. But we're going to get into next chapter and carry on through this Torah portion with the foundation of this week's appeal being set, I believe. And that is, it's time to stand up and be strong enough to say no when you need to say no. Let's get to the next chapter. Jackie.
And it came to be after the plague that Yahweh spoke to Moshe and Eleazar son of Aaron the priest, saying, Take a census of all the congregation of the children of Israel, from 20 years old and above, by their fathers' houses, everyone going out to the army in Israel. So Moshe and Eleazar the priest spoke with him in the desert plains of Moab by the Jordan of Jericho, saying, Take a census of the people from 20 years old and above, as Yahweh commanded Moshe and the children of Israel, who came out of the land of Mitzrayim. Reuben, firstborn of Israel, sons of Reuben, of Hanoch, the clan of the Hanochites, of Palu, the clan of the Paluites, of Hezron, the clan of the Hezronites, of Carmi, the clan of the Carmites. These are the clans of the Reubenites, and their registered ones were 43,730. And the son of Palu, Eliab. And the sons of Eliab, Nemuel and Dathan and Abiram. This Dathan and Abiram were the called ones of the congregation, who contended against Moshe and against Aharon in the company of Korah, when they contended against Yahweh. And the earth opened its mouth and swallowed them up, together with Korah, when that company died, when the fire consumed 250 men, and they became a sign, but the sons of Korah did not die. Sons of Shimon according to their clans, of Nemuel the clan of the Nemuelites, of Yamin the clan of the Yaminites, of Yachin the clan of the Yachinites, of Zerach the clan of the Zarchites, of Shaul the clan of the Shaulites. These are the clans of the Shimonites, 22,200. Sons of Gad according to their clans, of Zephon the clan of the Zephonites, of Hagi the clan of the Hagites, of Shuni the clan of the Shunites, of Ozni the clan of the Oznites, of Eri the clan of the Erites, of Arod the clan of the Arodites, of Areli the clan of the Arelites. These are the clans of the sons of Gad according to their registered ones, 40,500. Sons of Yehuda, Er and Unan. And Er and Unan died in the land of Canaan. The sons of Yehuda according to their clans, of Shelah, the clan of the Shelonites, of Peretz, the clan of the Parsites, of Zerach, the clan of the Zarchites. And sons of Peretz, of Hezron, the clan of the Hezronites, of Hamul, the clan of the Hamulites. These are the clans of Yehuda according to their registered ones, 76,500. Sons of Yisachar according to their clans, of Tola, the clan of the Tolaites, of Pua, the clan of the Punites, of Yashuv, the clan of the Yashuvites, of Shimron, the clan of the Shimronites. These are the clans of Yisachar according to the registered ones, 64,300. Sons of Zebulun according to their clans, of Zered, the clan of the Zardites, of Elon, the clan of the Elonites, of Yachliel, the clan of the Yachlielites. These are the clans of the Zebulunites according to their registered ones, 60,500. Sons of Joseph according to their clans, by Manasseh and Ephraim. Sons of Manasseh, of Machir, the clan of the Machirites, of Machir. And Machir brought forth Gilad, and Gilad the clan of the Giladites. These are the sons of Gilad, of Ezer, the clan of the Ezerites, of Chelek, the clans of the Chelekites, of Azriel, the clan of the Azrielites, of Shechem, the clan of the Shechemites, of Shemida, the clan of the Shemidaites, of Hefer, the clan of the Heferites. And Zelophehad, son of Hefer, had no sons but daughters. And the names of the daughters of Zelophehad, Michla and Noah, Ogla and Milcah and Tirzah. These are the clans of Manasseh, and their registered ones, 52,700. These are the sons of Ephraim according to their clans. Of Shuthalach, the clan of the Shuthalchites. Of Becher, the clans of the Bacharites. Of Tachan, the clan of the Tachanites. And these are the sons of Shuthalach. Of Aaron, the clans of the Aaronites. These are the clans of the sons of Ephraim according to their registered ones, 32,500. These are the sons of Joseph according to their clans. Sons of Benjamin according to their clans. Of Bela, the clan of the Belaites. Of Ashbel, the clan of the Ashbelites. Of Ahiram, the clan of the Ahiramites. Of Shephufam, the clan of the Shephufamites. Of Hufam, the clan of the Hufamites. The sons of Bela were Ard and Naaman. Of Ard, the clan of the Ardites. Of Naaman, the clan of the Naamites. These are sons of Benjamin according to their clans, and their registered ones 45,600. These are the sons of Dan according to their clans. Of Shuham, the clan of the Shuhamites. These are the clans of Dan according to their clans. All the clans of the Shuhamites according to their registered ones 64,400. Sons of Asher according to their clans. Of Yimnah, the clan of the Yimnahites. Of Yishwi, the clan of the Yishwites. Of Beriah, the clan of the Berites. Of the sons of Beriah. Of Heber, the clan of the Heberites. Of Malkiel, the clan of the Malkielites. And the name of the daughter of Asher was Serach. These are the clans of the sons of Asher according to their registered ones, 53,400. Sons of Naphtali according to their clans. Of Yachziel, the clan of the Yachzielites. Of Guni, the clan of the Gunites. Of Yetzer, the clan of the Yetzerites. Of Shilem, the clan of the Shelemites. These are the clans of Naphtali according to their clans, and their registered ones 45,400. These are the registered ones of the children of Israel, 601,730. And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, the land is to be divided to these as an inheritance, according to the number of names. To the large one you give a larger inheritance, and to the small one you give a smaller inheritance. Each shall be given its inheritance according to their registered ones. But the land is divided by lot. They inherit according to the names of the tribes of their fathers. According to the lot, their inheritance is divided between the larger and the smaller. And these are the registered ones of the Levites according to their clans. Of Gershon, the clan of the Gershonites. Of Kehath, the clan of the Kehathites. Of Merari, the clan of the Merarites. These are the clans of the Levites: the clan of the Livlites, the clan of the Hebronites, the clan of the Machlites, the clan of the Mushites, the clan of the Korhites. And Kehath brought forth Amram. And the name of Amram's wife was Jochebed, the daughter of Levi, who was born to Levi in Mitzrayim. And to Amram she bore Aharon and Moshe and their sister Miriam. And to Aharon were born Nadav and Abihu, Eleazar and Ithamar. And Nadav and Abihu died when they brought strange fire before Yahweh. And their registered ones were 23,000, every male from a new moon old and above. For they were not registered among the other children of Israel, because there was no inheritance given to them among the children of Israel. These are the ones registered by Moshe and Eleazar the priest, who registered the sons of Israel in the desert plains of Moab by the Jordan of Jericho. But among these there was not a man of those registered by Moshe and Aharon the priest when they registered the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Sinai. For Yahweh had said to them, they shall certainly die in the wilderness, and not a man was left of them except Caleb son of Jephunneh and Jehoshua son of Nun.
Okay, so after the plague had killed 24,000, as we said, Israel were in their last year in their journey in the wilderness, and this meant that the generation of those who were 20 years old and above that had come out of Mitzrayim, who were counted in the first census, were dead, except Caleb, Yehoshua, and Moshe at this stage, but he was soon to depart. And so a new count was needed to be taken, new leadership, and understood that was now going to lead the families of Israel into the inheritance. And this is a very significant count for us, especially in light of what just took place with this whole corruption with Baal. And so it was a clear who's counted worthy. When we look at this 38 years before this, the first census was taken, it's literally lift up the heads, count those who are worthy. We learn valuable lessons in that, highlighting our master giving us the command to count the cost of following him. We learn in the pattern of our obedience in the feasts of Yahweh and our counting to 50 from the waving of the sheaf of the first on the morrow after the Sabbath during the Feast of Unleavened Bread, all the way to Shavuot, teaching us a valuable lesson in having sin out of our lives, cleansed by the blood of Messiah, so that we are now permeated with the good leaven of the heaven, the good leaven from above, that we are now able to be a bride that's presented as worthy before the Master and waved as a wave offering acceptable before his face. So we see some powerful lessons here in terms of a census. The plague had swept through the camp. It was also now another sifting that was taking place, because this generation of 600 odd thousand men that were registered coming out of Mitzrayim were already dead, except Yehoshua and Caleb, And we see here this interval of 38 years, Yahweh commands another census because he wants to establish it's a taking stock. Okay, everything that's taken place, you're about to enter in, who is actually standing up and taking responsibility. And so we understand that this is another picture of a call for set apartness that's being given by the Eliyahu spirit message today. Who is counted worthy? Who's standing up? Who's ready to say, I am of Messiah? And who's counting themselves worthy to enter into the reign? Because in order to do that, you must calculate the cost that it entails in following the Master, And so we understand that the land would be inherited by lot. To the larger tribe, a larger lot would be given, and to the smaller tribes, a smaller lot would be given. So it was done fair and square. And so there's a clear picture here when we look at this here, when it says everyone going out to the army in Israel. So here is a call again as a mirror for us today. Who are those worthy and armed to fight the good fight of the belief? The Hebrew word for army is tzavah, which means army, warfare, battle, conflict, a host of an organized army. We know it comes from the verb tzavah, which means to wage war, or to fight, or to perform, or to serve. We also know as a compound title of Yahweh, Yahweh Tsevaot, he is the commander of the heavenly host, And so we also see that in the instructions that are given in the beginning of this book in Bemiḍbar 4, tzavah is used where the Levites were commanded to perform the service. So in other words, this is a picture of fighting the good fight, the thing that Shaul reminds Timotheus to lay hold of, and to fight the good fight of the belief, Lay hold on everlasting life to which you were called and confessed and made that good confession before many witnesses. Our Master gives us clear parables of being counted worthy to be counted in him and fight the good fight. And then we see in this chapter not only a census that's being done, and there's a couple of pointers that we can take over this chapter which we can learn valuable lessons from. And here for the first time we see Eleazar being called priest. Obviously Aharon is dead, but here we see he's now called priest rather than son of a priest. And his authority was now firmly established. And here the census taking place, we see here that possibly by the evidence that he had raised his son Pineḥas very well, because Pineḥas did what was needed to be done. We see Eleazar representing the qualities of one who managed his household well, And when we look at all the tribes that are mentioned and the differences between the encampments, just to go through, you can look at the notes if you like to see the meanings of all the names. I'm not going to go in depth into that. I think that can be a good self-study for interest's sake, etc. But what I do want to highlight is just some of the differences between the second census and the first census that took place when they came out of Mitzrayim. Now, the number of the registered ones of Reuben was 43,730. In the first census, they were 46,500. So there's a reduction in terms of fighting age of 2,770. We know that it was from the tribe of Reuben that the rebels sought to, Dathan and Abiram, joined the company of Korah. Korah was part of the Levites, but Dathan and Abiram, Reubenites, came and they joined that rebellion and were put to death. What we do take note of here in looking at this section here, in the sons of Korah did not die. Now, it's very interesting. In Bemiḍbar, we are told in chapter 16 that all who were with Korah were swallowed up. I mentioned earlier about Moshe saying at that stage, move away from the tents of these people. And if what is not heard of happens, then you know it's from Yahweh. But if they die as other men die, then you know it's not Yahweh. And immediately the earth opens up and swallows them alive. What we can learn from this is that the sons of Korah at that stage listened to Moshe and moved away from the tents of their father, didn't associate themselves with the rebellion. And the same is true for us today who are now in covenant. We discovered that our fathers inherited lies, futile matters, worthless matters, lies, and we distanced ourselves from the rebellion to the truth that they operated in. When the congregation was told to get away from the tents of Korah, some of the sons had wisdom and listened to the wisdom of the Torah and moved away. These sons would get to enter into the promised land. This is a valuable lesson for us today because the soul that sins dies, we're told in Yechezkiel. In Marcos 10, verse 28 to 30, our master, we see the following. Kepha began to say to our master, see, we have left all and we have followed you. Yehoshua said, truly I say to you, there is no one who has left house or brothers or sisters or father or mother or wife or children or lands for the sake of me and the good news, who shall not receive 100-fold now in this time, houses and brothers and sisters and mothers and children and lands with persecutions, and in the age to come, everlasting life. In other words, when we die to self and pass through the waters, we are grafted into a new family. Our bloodline and heritage is now in Scripture, and that's what we're learning every week. I was thinking the other day, there are so many divisions out there and people trying to say, no, but they are the true Israel. They are the true Israel. And they are extremely pride-filled, arrogant movements that claim their race to be the only race that can be the true believers. Be that from whatever race. I mean, you get it from all sides, so I'm not even picking one. But it's very clear that racism is not tolerated in the body of Messiah. And what marks us, a lot of people might put on, I was born in Scotland, but you know what my heritage is what we're going through every week, because I'm now the Israelite. I'm a Hebrew. I'm one that's crossed over. My blood is Messiah's blood. Okay? And so therefore, I don't go on and say, oh, I'm from this and I'm from that and make songs and do all the things. No, I'm saying this is what people, and even on the Torah walk, there are racist movements within people claiming they're not really on the Torah walk, because if they were, they wouldn't be racist. And so we understand here, when we're looking at this genealogy and the census, we must look in the mirror of the word and say, what the census of my life is? It begins with Matityahu 1, the genealogy of Messiah that begins with Avram to Messiah. It's a covenant genealogy that we are part of. And therefore, when we go through this history, we are beginning to see our history, our heritage, that teaches us not to rebel, teaches us to stand up and be ardent for who we are in the Master, willing to throw off everything that entangles. And you know what? We will lose in this fleshly life much. But in this fleshly life, our Master says we'll also gain much. And in the age to come, everlasting life. So we are nearing, so to speak, the entrance into the promise of everlasting life, into the reign of our Master. We who are counted or called to have been counted worthy to enter in must acknowledge the start of our journey is an acknowledgement of the lies that we inherited in error. And that's what Yirmiyahu 16 highlights for us. That the nations will come and say, the scattered nations will come and they'll start growing up and saying, but what we're being brought up in is wrong, futile, worthless matters, and they shall know the name of Yahweh. Just as Korah and all who were with him were swallowed up, we also see that the counterfeit rebellious ones will be swallowed up when our Master comes in his wrath. We've left the tent or house of whoring. We've come out to be separated unto our Master. And we must be on guard, as pictured through what took place at the Baal Peor event, is not to allow that corruption to infiltrate our set-apartness at all. So Reuben reminds us of a rebellion, and a rebellion will cost you. Then we look at Shimon. Shimon, in this census, was only 22,000. In the first census, Shimon was 59,300. This is the biggest loss when you look across the board of all the tribes. And then we got to think, hold on, that's a reduction. If you look at the comparisons, that's a reduction of 37,100 people in this tribe alone. This was a huge change. Now we've just been through what took place at Baal Peor, and we're reminded that Zimri was from Shimon. Perhaps the majority of the 24,000 that were struck in this last plague were from Shimon, because they may have just been a tribe that was more arrogant in their adoption of whoring. Now, what's worth taking note of is Shimon means herd. So this is the tribe over a 40-year wilderness journey had the most casualties. In terms of the next generation not even being the same number as the previous generation. So how many of those were actually also put to death because of sin, because the soul that sin dies? And so in this 7 assemblies in Chazon, we see a repeated message to each assembly. He who has ears to hear what the Spirit says. This teaches us a lesson. If you want to be counted, you need to have ears to hear, and ears to hear to God to do. With a tribe that at Mount Sinai was almost 2/3 bigger, or 3 times bigger than what they were now at the brink of entering into the promised land, teaches us a valuable lesson how 2/3 of mankind will be swallowed up by famine, sword, and plague, and only 1/3 will still be left, and then out of that 1/3, still a refinement would take place to see who has ears to hear the truth. Gad went from 40,500 to 45,650. So in comparative census taking place between first and second, Gad had a slight increase in their numbers of 5,000 odd. Yehuda had a very small increase of 1,900. Yisachar, we see in Yisachar, powerful lesson here. When we look at their genealogy, they had an increase of 9,900. Zebulun had an increase of 3,100. Yosef increased with, you've got Yosef, and then it gives Manasseh. Manasseh increased by 20,500, a big increase. Ephraim increased by 8,000. So collectively, when you look at Yosef, as in Manasseh and Ephraim, they were the largest tribe if you take them under Yosef, 85,200, which highlights the promise of fruitfulness in our master that we've been given. Binyamin increased by 10,200. Dan increased by 1,100. Asher, they increased by 11,900, and Naphtali decreased by 8,000. So 4 tribes, there was a decrease. Obviously, the biggest was Shimon. All the other tribes increased. What we take note of, the census, the difference between the first census and the second census was a difference of 1,820 less in the second than the first. So there was a slight decrease, but it shows us again that Yahweh knows those who are his. And by this count, we can see that this new generation had a great responsibility now to be on guard against falling like their fathers had fallen because of rebellion. Each tribe would be allocated, as I said, territory according to their size. And then we're given a listing of the Levites, more specifically to highlight where Moshe and Miriam and Aharon come from. And then we're given the clans of the Levites, etc. And we take note here the registering of these ones that are given and the redemption that would take place that was done at the time of Aharon, and the difference between the firstborn and the Levites. So the Levites would take place of the firstborn. So what was being established in the census is a clear witness of, it's not a case of, okay, well, we didn't make it right the first time, so now let's figure out the way we're going to go. Yahweh is still concerned in seeing who is worthy of being counted to serve him, who is being worthy enough to be considered to lead people in the truth. We know that we've been bought at a price, and in our master, we've been counted worthy to serve him as long as we stay in him and staying in him is key. Not being found to be rebellious, but rather having moved ourselves away from the tents of the rebellious. We see Shaul telling Timotheus not to actually have any part of those who are whoring or operating in corrupt ways. And so we learn from the census a lesson on the price that our master paid for us to be purchased and be grafted in to a covenant that we were once far off from. And not only the covenants of promise that we are now being part of, but in those covenants of promise, we have an everlasting covenant of shalom that we are to guard at all costs. Chapter 27. Who would like to read? Rachel. Okay.
Then came the daughters of Zelophehad, son of Hefer, son of Gilad, son of Machir, son of Manasseh, from the clans of Manasseh, son of Joseph. And these were the names of his daughters, Machlah, Noah, and Hoglah, and Milcah, and Tirzah. And they stood before Moshe, and before Eleazar the priest, and before the leaders and all the congregation, by the doorway of the tent of appointment, saying, Our father died in the wilderness, yet he was not in the company of those who were met together against Yahweh, in company with Korah, but he died in his own sin, and he had no sons. Why should the name of our father be removed from among his clan because he had no son? Give us a possession among the brothers of our father. Moshe then brought their case before Yahweh, and Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, The daughters of Zelophehad speak what is right. You should certainly give them a possession of inheritance among their father's brothers, and cause the inheritance of their father to pass to them. And speak to the children of Israel, saying, When a man dies and has no son, then you shall cause his inheritance to pass to his daughter. And if he has no daughter, then you shall give his inheritance to his brothers. And if he has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to his father's brothers. And if his father has no brothers, then you shall give his inheritance to the nearest relative in his clan, and he shall possess it. And it shall be to the children of Israel a law of right ruling, as Yahweh commanded Moshe. And Yahweh said to Moshe, Go up into this mount Avarim, and see the land which I have given to the children of Israel. And when you have seen it, you also shall be gathered to your people as Aaron your brother was gathered, because you rebelled against my mouth in the wilderness of Zin, in the strife of the congregation, to set me apart at the waters before their eyes. These were the waters of Meribah at Kadesh in the wilderness of Zin. And Moshe spoke to Yahweh, saying, Let Yahweh, the Elohim of the spirits and spirits of all flesh, appoint a man over the congregation, who goes out before them and comes in before them, who leads them out and brings them in, so that the congregation of Yahweh be not like sheep without a shepherd. And Yahweh said to Moshe, Take Yehoshua son of Nun with you, a man in whom is the Spirit, and you shall lay your hand on him, and shall set him before Eleazar the priest, and before all the congregation, and give him command before their eyes, and shall put some of your esteem upon him, so that all the congregation of the children of Israel obey him. And he is to stand before Eleazar the priest, who shall inquire before Yahweh for him by the right ruling of the Urim. At his word they go out, and at his word they come in, both he and all the children of Israel with him, all the congregation. And Moshe did as Yahweh commanded him, and took Yehoshua and set him before Eleazar the priest and before the congregation, and laid his hands on him and commissioned him, as Yahweh commanded by the hand of Moshe.
Okay, so inheritance for daughters. That's really what's highlighted here. And I think it's a powerful passage which teaches us valuable lessons of the heart and the character of the daughters of Zelophehad, showing that while Zelophehad had died, they said, listen, he died for his own issues, kind of thing. He certainly was one that had raised his daughters well to seek the right ruling of Yahweh. And so while it had not been clear what happens when there's no sons, the daughters didn't just say, okay, well, I guess we don't have anything. They thought, hold on, they followed the right procedure. They didn't go arrogantly to Moshe and say, give us an inheritance. They went and said, listen, we don't want to lose our father's name. Give us an inheritance. What happens? We don't have brothers, And so Moshe goes to Yahweh, and Yahweh says what they say is right. And this is a valuable lesson when there are things in the word that might not be clear to us. We shouldn't just assume to know, well, it doesn't really say that, I'm not really sure where it says it, so I'll just wing it and I'll make up my own thing. No, we are to seek the word and find wisdom in the word so that we can get proper direction and clarity. That's what I see here in terms of one of the major lessons we learn from the daughters of Zelophehad is seeking the truth when you don't know what to do. I mean, that's a given in any circumstance, you know. And so they approached Moshe, and they weren't turned away for being young or for being women. I mean, this is another valuable part. It shows there was respect for women in the camp and for Yahweh's word, that he desires both men and women to freely approach him. These 5 daughters were clearly walking in obedience to the Torah. Their lifestyle shows it. The request that they made showed that they weren't trying to now take something that they had no right to. They wanted to say, what is the right thing to do? You know? And give us a possession. This should be our desire in the Master. We should desire to have our possession in him so that we know how to rightly take the proper responsibility of that which he's entrusted into our lives. And in order to possess, we need to make sure that we dispossess, so that our hands are clearly on that which should be our possession wholeheartedly, so that we don't give room for wrong ways to cripple what our Master desires for us to have so much of. You know, so possession comes from the word achuzah, which means possession, property, or sight, coming from the verb which means to grab hold of or take possession. In other words, they took courage to stand up and say, hold on, here's the census, everything else, you've got our father here, but there's no son, so we want to take hold. We're not going to sit around and wait and see what happens when the lot comes. We want to have assurance when we're entering in, we have part of this, you know, and that we're not just going to be kicked out. Now, the idea of possessing carries a great picture of taking hold of that which you should. This verb achaz is translated as holds in Eov or Job chapter 17 verse 9. It says, and the righteous holds to his way, and he who has clean hands becomes stronger and stronger. And this is I'm using this verse today to highlight a valuable lesson here. Many people seek the possession of Elohim that he's promised for us, yet they're unwilling to take hold of it by holding firm to the pure walk of set apartness. So they aren't being righteous to hold on to the way. So their hands get weaker and weaker. And we see in the passage of scripture to strengthen the hands, to make firm the weak knees. Say to those who are anxious, be strong, your Elohim's coming with vengeance. He's coming to save you, you know, with recompense. If our hands are holding on to the ways of Elohim, which is a picture of doing what his word says, then our clean hands will get stronger and stronger. You'll get better at being obedient. But when you take your hand off a little bit, compromise, your hand will get weaker and weaker, and you won't get stronger and stronger in obedience. That's when the infiltration into one's life will be seen through compromised ways. The request of the daughters of Zelophehad was truly an earnest plea and a great desire to take hold of that which Elohim has promised. And this is a lesson for us of how strong is your desire to take hold of every promise that is yes and amen in Messiah. This is coupled with the zeal that we are to have for him. Because when that desire in you is, I want what Yahweh has for me, then that is the focus of your life, to do it the right way. Not, oh, well, it doesn't say what's going to happen to daughters, so let's just go and take it our own way. This is a picture of doing things Yahweh's way. And when we don't have the full knowledge, we don't just assume to do what we think is right. We make sure that what we are doing is right because we've sorted out. You know, this word is also translated as seized in Tehillah 119 verse 53, when it says, rage has seized me because of the wrong who forsake your Torah. It ties in with the zeal and this taking possession, you know. And so these daughters didn't want to end up like all those that had already perished. They made a bold declaration of the belief that they wanted what Yahweh had to give to a covenant people. And then we see a valuable picture in this. Just as a side note, I like to highlight why we emphasize and encourage the reading of the ISR scriptures that has restored the Hebrew names of people and places for good reason. Because when we look at the daughters of Zelophehad, one of them is Noah. And now most people today will just read Noah in the flood, Noah, the daughter, and not kind of understand the difference. Now, Noach is the correct name for the man that Yahweh called as a righteous man to build an ark for him, and only him and his family, 8 people, were saved through the flood. And he was a proclaimer of righteousness for the 120 years that Yahweh gave mankind until the flood would come, and yet only 8 were saved. Nuach means rest. And so it highlights the rest that we enter into in our master. Now, what's the opposite of rest? Is chaos. Okay? Now, Noah means movement. And it comes from a word which actually means to totter or to and fro, or to be agitated or to be shaken, etc. So you get a picture. Now, not that the daughter of Zelophehad was shaken, but I'm highlighting just a bit of emphasis here that Noah is the opposite of Nuach, because Nuach represents rest, where Noah represents being shaken. And so the righteous are not shaken or tossed about by every wind of teaching. So not to attribute that quality to the daughter of Zelophehad that showed a righteous standard of seeking set apartness, but just for the simple side note of how important it is that we stress Hebrew words and of people and places and various root words that we use in Scripture to bring across a proper message of the good news that we are to God, and we enter into the rest of our master. So Moshe was told to go up to the Mount Avarim, and he was told to look at the land, but he was not going to enter it because he disobeyed Yahweh at the waters of Meribah when him and Aharon, instead of speaking to the rock, they struck the rock. And we went through that recently. But we do see a powerful picture here. You know, Moshe is asking Yahweh to anoint another man to lead them, and one in whom the Spirit of Yahweh is, and Yehoshua is now officially taking the role of leadership over Moshe. And there's a wonderful picture here in terms of Moshe not entering in doesn't mean we don't take the Torah with us into the promises that we are to live in the Messiah. What it means is that we still uphold the Torah of Moshe as guided under the headship of our high priest and king, Yeshua Messiah. Our Messiah came and said he didn't come to do away with the Torah and the prophets. He came to fully proclaim it, establish it, meet the requirements, and teach us how we can walk in those requirements and still be able to walk in and enter into his rest and remain in that rest. And so there's a wonderful picture that we see here in this chapter highlighting for us the role of Moshe, and that is to bring us to a place of obedience. And when we no longer want to be under the instruction of a trainer that leads us to Messiah, we're basically saying we want Messiah without training. And therefore, we want Messiah our own way. And isn't that what most people are doing? So they want to possess the witness of Yeshua Messiah, but they don't want to guard the commands. Therefore, their witness of Messiah is rendered null and void. So we need the Torah as a constant training to guard the witness of Yeshua Messiah that leads us in the perfection of his Torah. Any thoughts on this chapter?
Just obviously, Yehoshua had the spirit of Moshe.
Yes.
But he didn't have a different
No, he didn't have the spirit. What was on Moshe was now given to Yehoshua. And so we see here a clear establishment. Now, Moshe says so that he would lead them in and out. This is a picture again. We do nothing outside of our high priest and king. And in that comes the idea as the clear, Yahweh's spirit is the same. His spirit of the truth is the spirit of the truth. The Torah is truth. The Torah wasn't set aside when the Spirit was poured out on the believers at Shavuot, and as a pledge of the inheritance that we've been given, sealing our lives. What that means is he now puts his Torah in our hearts and he seals us with that so that we are equipped to actually operate according to his Torah as a witness of who we are in our high priest and king.
I mean, maybe I've said it wrong. They had the same spirit.
Yes.
They didn't have Moshe's
No, but it's Yahweh's spirit.
But it was the
Yes,
same
spirit of the truth, as the Renewed Writings keeps making it clear. Eleazar is now established as the high priest, and in his hand would be put the Urim and the Tumim, and we know that that represents the lights, or the revelation and the perfection of Yahweh, the Aleph and Tav, his word. And so as our high priest and king came in the flesh of man, he came to reveal to us the perfection of his word, from beginning to the end, revealing to us that no part of his word is done away with, that when anybody adds or takes away, they are bringing swift destruction upon themselves. And so we are told in Devarim that the Urim and the Tumim belongs to your lovingly committed one. So therefore, what's the function of the high priest would be to bring out the light and perfection of the Torah, bring light to the word, revelation to the word. So in our master, when we turn to the master, the veil is taken away. It's not the Torah that's taken away. It's the understanding of the Torah that's actually made known to us. Praise Yahweh for that. You know, without the Torah of Moshe, we can never fully understand the revelation. Without the first 5 books of Scripture, we can never understand the last book that we have in Scripture.
Because then you don't know what the covenant is.
Yes.
You never made a covenant.
No. There's only one way, and that's to walk in our master as guarding the Torah and possessing the witness of who he is in our lives. As a people that are zealous for him, that are clinging to him, cleaving to the good and shrinking from what is wicked, and throwing off everything that entangles so that we can run in the way of his commands, because when we have a love for his Torah, there is no stumbling block because we are firmly planted on the rock of our deliverance. So when we talk about Nuach and Noah as a difference between rest and being tossed or moved about, we are understanding the parable of the wise and foolish builder. Those that are built on the rock, when the waves come, they're not shaken, they're not moved. But those on sand, and on sand, on sand is the many doctrines of man, where the rock is the spirit of the truth, the Torah of Yahweh, a clear foundation that we've been built up on in our cornerstone, our head, as living stones, that we can be secure in him and have this covenant of shalom, the shalom that we are to have perfectly lived out in our lives. Amen. Cheryl's saying Yahweh has a solution for every problem in his word. His pattern guides our lives completely. Man's ways use worldly laws, And those laws of man change from ruler to ruler, addendum after addendum. And I just want to make it clear, the Renewed Writings is not an addendum to, how can I say the right wording here? It's not a replacement. It's not an amendment. Yes, it's an addendum. Thank you. It's not an amendment. That's the right word. Man has lots of amendments to man-made laws because the new guy comes up, he doesn't like what the last guy did, and this is what happened with all the sovereigns of the nations, It even happened in the house of Israel when the laws of Omri were established. And after the laws of Omri, from that, then Isabel brought in Baal worship. And so they had their own ways. Yahweh's ways and his laws are forever. And we thank our Master that he gives us the perfect shalom to actually recognize how necessary the Torah is for us. For without it, we have no life, actually. To have the life in Messiah without his Torah is folly, because there is no life outside of the Torah of Yahweh. And therefore, having that Torah made alive to us in the possession of the witness of Yeshua Messiah in our lives gives us the hope of eternal life with him, having the assurance that we can operate in perfect shalom and not be tossed by every wind of teaching, but we can stand firm and take a stand like Pineḥas and be ardent for Yahweh as he is ardent for us.
That was interesting with just because Yahweh just said, okay, now you're going to allot the land,
Yes.
divide it, bigger tribes and smaller tribes, and they come and say, okay, well, now we don't get an inheritance because my dad's not there. he says, okay, no, they get an inheritance. And then comes the other tribes and say, okay, well, now if they marry into other tribes, then we're gonna lose some of our land. So those are the amendments or addendums.
Yes.
You can say it doesn't change the laws.
No.
But they
It brings further clarity.
Which
Yes.
is what the renewed
Yes.
writings are doing.
So the renewed writings, in a
brings
sense,
better
are
understanding.
yes, it helps us understand. It brings clarity. It brings insight. But to have the renewed writings alone, you can make up whatever you want. And that's what people do when they twist the words, not only of Shaul, but of Kepha, of Yochanan, of Yehuda, of all the Besorah. They're twisting it to their own destruction because they're not seeing it in light of the foundation of the Torah and the prophets, being that which must be the lens by which we read the renewed writings. You know? And this is where many people have a stumbling block, in the fact that they try to view the Torah and the prophets through the lens of the renewed writings.
I mean, I've often used this when Yaakov says, flee from idolatry.
Yes.
How would you know what's idolatry?
Yeah.
If you don't read the
Yeah.
Torah. You're gonna anything or whatever in your eyes can be idolatry. But it's plain and clear, clear what's idolatry in the Torah.
Okay, so we go through this Torah portion. We see the pattern here. You've got the zeal of Pineḥas being established as an everlasting pattern of zeal that Yahweh extends to a bride that loves him as he loves her. Then you see the clear witness of a bride that stands up must distress that which tries to destroy a set apartness of a bride and not have part with that which whores and corrupts. And then we see the census and who's being counted. Then we see inheritance, who actually gets inheritance, and clear lines being established. Then we see a clear witness of an establishment of the Torah and high priest still operating under the function and guidance of that which was given by Yahweh through Moshe, and is represented by Eleazar and Yehoshua as a replica pattern of Yeshua Messiah coming in the flesh of man. And then we come to the pattern showing that even after the death of Moshe, the standard by which you draw near is still the same. So now we come to a chapter which this new generation needed to be reminded of again, and that is all the offerings. Chapter 28.
And Yahweh spoke to Moshe, saying, Command the children of Israel, and you shall say to them, Take heed to bring my offering, my food for my offerings made by fire as a sweet fragrance to me at their appointed time. And you shall say to them, This is the offering made by fire which you bring to Yahweh. 2 male lambs a year old, perfect ones, daily, a continual ascending offering. The one lamb you prepare in the morning, and the other lamb you prepare between the evenings, with 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering, mixed with 1/4 of a hin of pressed oil, a continual ascending offering which was offered at Mount Sinai for a sweet fragrance, an offering made by fire to Yahweh. And its drink offering, 1/4 of a hin for each lamb. Pour out the drink to Yahweh as an offering in the set-apart place. And the other lamb you prepare between the evenings, as the morning grain offering and its drink offering, you prepare it as an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yahweh. And on the Sabbath day 2 lambs a year old, perfect ones, and 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering, mixed with oil, with its drink offering. The ascending offering for every Sabbath, besides the continual ascending offering with its drink offering. And on the beginnings of your new moons you bring near an ascending offering to Yahweh. 2 young bulls and 1 ram, and 7 lambs a year old, perfect ones. 3/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering, mixed with oil, for each bull. 2/10 of an ephah of fine flour as a grain offering, mixed with oil for the 1 ram, and 1/10 of an ephah of fine flour mixed with oil as a grain offering for each lamb, as an ascending offering of sweet fragrance, an offering made by fire to Yahweh. And their drink offering is 1/2 a hin of wine for a bull, and 1/3 of a hin for a ram, and 1/4 of a hin for a lamb. This is the ascending offering for each new moon throughout the new moons of the year. And 1 male goat as a sin offering to Yahweh is prepared, besides the continual ascending offering and its drink offering.
And in the first new moon, on the 14th day, is the Pesach of Yahweh. And on the 15th day of this new moon is a festival. For 7 days unleavened bread is eaten. On the first day is a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work. And you shall bring near an offering made by fire as an ascending offering to Yahweh. 2 young bulls and 1 ram, and 7 lambs a year old, perfect ones they are for you. And their grain offering, fine flour mixed with oil. Prepare 3/10 of an ephah for a bull, and 2/10 for a ram. Prepare 1/10 of an ephah for each of the 7 lambs, and 1 goat as a sin offering to make atonement for you. Prepare these besides the ascending offering of the morning, which is for a continual ascending offering. According to these you are to prepare the food of the offering made by fire daily for 7 days, as a sweet fragrance to Yahweh. It is prepared besides the continual ascending offering and its drink offering. And on the 7th day you have a set-apart gathering, you do no servile work. And on the day of the first fruits, when you bring a new grain offering to Yahweh at your festival of Shavuot, you have a set-apart gathering, you do no servile work. And you shall bring near an ascending offering as a sweet fragrance to Yahweh. 2 young bulls, 1 ram, and 7 lambs a year old, with their grain offering of fine flour mixed with oil. 3/10 of an ephah for each bull, 2/10 for the 1 ram, 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs, 1 male goat to make atonement for you. Perfect ones they are for you. Prepare them with their drink offerings, besides the continual ascending offering with its grain offering. So just carry on. And in the 7th new moon, on the first day of the new moon, you have a set-apart gathering. You do no servile work. It is Yom Teruah for you. And you shall prepare an ascending offering as a sweet fragrance to Yahweh. 1 young bull, 1 ram, 7 lambs a year old, perfect ones. And their grain offering, fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah for the bull, 2/10 for the ram, and 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs, and 1 male goat as a sin offering to make atonement for you. Besides the ascending offering with its grain offering for the new moon, the continual ascending offering with its grain offering, and their drink offerings, according to their right ruling, as a sweet fragrance, an offering made by fire to Yahweh. And on the 10th day of this 7th new moon you have a set-apart gathering, and you shall afflict your beings, you do no work. And you shall bring near an ascending offering to Yahweh, a sweet fragrance. 1 young bull, 1 ram, 7 lambs a year old, perfect ones they are for you. And their grain offering, fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah for the bull, 2/10 for the 1 ram, 1/10 for each of the 7 lambs, 1 male goat as a sin offering, besides the sin offering for atonement, the continual ascending offering with its grain offering, and their drink offerings. And on the 15th day of the 7th new moon you have a set-apart gathering, you do no servile work, and you shall celebrate a festival to Yahweh 7 days. And you shall bring near an ascending offering, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yahweh. 13 young bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs a year old, perfect ones they are, and their grain offering, fine flour mixed with oil, 3/10 of an ephah for each of the 13 bulls, 2/10 for each of the 2 rams, and 1/10 for each of the 14 lambs. And 1 male goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offering, its grain offering and its drink offering. Then on the 2nd day, 12 young bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs, by their number, according to the right ruling. And 1 male goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offering with its grain offering and their drink offerings. And on the 3rd day, 11 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs, by their number, according to the right ruling. And 1 goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offerings, its grain offering and its drink offering. Then on the 4th day, 10 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering and their drink offerings, for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs, by their number, according to the right ruling. And 1 male goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offering, its grain offering and its drink offering. Then on the 5th day, 9 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs, by their number, according to the right ruling. Sorry.
Carry on, okay?
It's fine. And 1 goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offering, its grain offering and its drink offering. Then on the 6th day, 8 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs by their number, according to the right ruling, and 1 goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offering, its grain offering and its drink offering. Then on the 7th day, 7 bulls, 2 rams, 14 lambs a year old, perfect ones, and their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bulls, for the rams, and for the lambs by their number, according to the right ruling, and 1 goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offering, its grain offering and its drink offering. On the 8th day you have an assembly, you do no servile work, and you shall bring near an ascending offering, an offering made by fire, a sweet fragrance to Yahweh, 1 bull, 1 ram, 7 lambs a year old, perfect ones, their grain offering and their drink offerings for the bull, for the ram, and for the lambs by their number, according to the right ruling, and 1 goat as a sin offering, besides the continual ascending offerings, its grain offering and its drink offering. These you prepare to Yahweh at your appointed times, besides your vowed offerings and your voluntary offerings, as your ascending offerings and your grain offering, as your drink offerings and your peace offerings. And Moshe spoke to the children of Israel according to all that Yahweh had commanded Moshe.
Okay, so we read both of those chapters because it covers all the offerings that are prescribed for the children of Israel. And what's nice here is that Moshe commanded the children of Israel all these offerings that would be done, knowing that Moshe is not going with them. Again, another picture that just because Moshe physically wasn't going with them, that the words of Moshe were not to be obeyed. This chapter, these commands that are given, it's a repetition of all the offerings that are to be brought. And it might sound like a repetition, but we have to understand this new generation that had just been counted. And so, in other words, a new census had taken place. And so they were now being instructed as leaders of how to draw near to Yahweh. The standard of how to draw near to Yahweh hadn't changed, but it was being enforced again, that this is how you draw near. Israel had been led astray through the corrupt worship with the daughters of Moab, enticing them, and here they were now being set straight again. In this instruction we're given here, Yahweh told Moshe to command the children of Israel. In other words, they were clearly being told that make sure you do this command. So when it comes to the feasts of Yahweh, because this is a picture, we know that we don't bring the blood of bulls and goats now because all of these offerings was a means of drawing near to Yahweh. You know, the Hebrew word for offering, I remind you, is korban, which literally means offering or sacrifice, and it comes from the verb karav, which means to come near, draw near, come forward. So the offerings were a means in the pattern of the service of the Levitical priesthood of how a nation could actually approach Yahweh and actually be accepted by him. So now the blood of bulls and goats were always a shadow picture of the coming good matters by the blood of Messiah that gives us now access to draw near to him. So what changed in the pattern of drawing near is the blood. But obedience in the Torah didn't change. The only aspect of the Torah that changed is our approach. It's not by blood of bulls and goats, but it's by the blood of Yeshua Messiah. But then we learn through the pattern that's given here of the height of the seriousness, in a sense, of what all of these offerings represented at its specific times that Yahweh required them. And so korban is understood as the ability of drawing near to Yahweh and the blessing that's contained in it. It should not be seen as something grotesque and, oh no, and it's just killing of animals. It's more than that. Yahweh used that pattern to cause people to be diligent in their not taking lightly whose presence that they were actually being entrusted to come into. You know, so the idea of korban was being made clear again to this new generation, because we just saw Zimri and Cosby coming past the tent with arrogance. And here it's established this new census that's taken place. 24,000 had died. All the leaders that had previously been leaders were dead. Now a new generation, you're appointed, you're counted now. This is how you guard Yahweh's presence in your midst. And make sure you don't, again, have the Baal Peor incident being that which is repeated. So when we look at all these listings, we see a clear picture of our need to be drawing near to our Master. Shaul reminds us that we are to present our lives, our reasonable worship, set apart before the Master as a daily living offering. That is what's expected of us. And so when we look at the design of the tabernacle, we're reminded of the door that we enter into by our Master giving us a washing, that the woman who used to have the mirrors at the tent door is a picture of us looking intently. That became the bronze laver, the bronze from the mirrors that was used for that. But we come in by a washing that our Master provides. Then we are reminded of the slaughter place, his sacrifice that he has done for us, and his blood that was shed, his life that was poured out as a drink offering on our behalf, giving us the ability to be a daily living offering where we put to death the things of the flesh. And how we keep ourselves in covenant is through the washing of the word, so that we can come to the set apart place where the showbread table is and light for the table is given as we offer up the incense prayers before our Master, as a continual offering, lifting each other up, building one another up, keeping his appointed times, where we have access to the throne of favor in our time of need because the veil has been torn and we have this gift being given to us, and therefore we don't take lightly the korban aspect of our Master's sacrifice that's been given to us. And when we look at all these offerings, we can learn some valuable lessons in this. So we also see daily there was to be 2 lambs, one in the morning, one in the evening. This in itself teaches us the valuable lesson of meditating on the Torah day and night. Tehillah 1 tells us very clearly it's a blessing to do so, because we won't be sitting in the seat of scoffers. We won't be standing in the path of sinners. We won't be looking out for the counsel of the wrong, because we'll have the wisdom of the Torah teaching us how to stand, delighting in the Torah, meditating on it day and night. That's pictured through the 2 lambs that are brought every single day. Then this is the continual ascending offering. As we realize that for a moment in our lives, we don't let our lives not be a daily ascending offering. Ascending offering represents our all, and it represents that which is given wholeheartedly over to our Master. And so we must not be conformed to the pattern of this world, but we must be transformed by the renewing of our mind. If we're not meditating on the Torah, we're not being renewed. We look at the grain offering, it speaks of fellowship, and it speaks of the joy it is that we have when we think of the meal offering or the tribute. The grain offering is the one offering out of all the offerings that doesn't require blood because it's from the grain. But what it does represent, it represents a present, a tribute, brought by the one bringing the gift to the one they're offering the gift to. And so when we present our lives, part of that presentation of our lives is making sure that we're not neglecting the gathering of the set apart ones. It's part of our being part of the household as we understand grain and the measure basket, the ephahs that are or how many omers in an ephah basket, and each one is equated to an omer. Therefore, we also realize that we are in this together, and when one part suffers, we all suffer. Therefore, we have a responsibility. If we offer up our lives as a daily living offering, but we're not gathering on the Sabbath, we've rendered our offering as null and void. And so we need to realize the responsibility of our lives, being that which is committed to being built up and building one another up in the Master. The drink offering represents being given over to the Master. Now, the drink offering being that of wine, that would be a picture of joy and a picture of gladness, teaches us that we are not to be grumblers. We also are to be cheerful givers, as Shaul writes to the Corinthians. Let each one give as he purposes in his heart, not of necessity, for Elohim loves a joyous giver. Now, what he's saying there is he's not bringing in a new standard. Obedience is obedience. But when you're bringing a tribute, a free gift, being part of the body and a celebration of that, it can't be done under compulsion. It can't be done because when you're small, you're told to do it because you're learning. But as Colleen was saying just now, when you get an adult and you know what, you're no longer disciplined anymore, Yahweh's not going to force you to love him. But when you do want to show that love for him, it's not because, I have to do this. It has to come from a place of joy. And being a drink offering, we take note a valuable lesson. The drink offering that were offered in the service of the tabernacle was poured out next to the slaughter place. It wasn't enjoyed by the priests bringing the offering. They poured it out on the ground, not into their throats. We learn a valuable lesson because Nadav and Avihu were struck dead because they got drunk, actually. Let's just call it what it is. The instruction to not drink when in service came straight after their act, which shows that they took the drink offering and drank it and assumed to do what they wanted and approach Yahweh with their own strange fire and change the pattern. So, as a body of Messiah, who is our high priest interceding continually for us, therefore it means he's constantly in service, highlights the valuable lesson that as believers, we are not given over to strong drink or wine whatsoever. Because not for a moment should any of us consider that we are out of service. Because if we assume to do that, we are by default saying Messiah, our head, is out of service. And where does that lead for intercession on others? So we realize that being poured out as a drink offering, we need to make sure that we are presenting our lives as a living offering and making sure we are not being fueled by the things of the flesh, but we are ready to just give it to Yahweh. You know, the drink offering is a powerful lesson because Shaul writes and he tells the Philippians, he says in chapter 2, he says, in fact, even if I am being poured out as a drink offering, so he uses the language of service in the tabernacle and the requirements. He says, if I am being poured out as a drink offering on the offering and service of your belief, I'm glad and rejoice with you. So too should you be glad and rejoice with me. So he's saying, you too need to be poured out as a drink offering. You need to be giving your all. You need to be, people who want to hold on to fleshly things are not actually representative of the drink offering. That's actually being poured out as a symbol of giving everything over to Yahweh. And that he is the one that we have life in. And then we come to the Sabbath offerings. Besides the lamb morning and night that was done every day, there were extra Sabbath offerings. And it highlights the intensity of drawing near on the Sabbath. So it's not like, oh, I've been in the Word every day this week, so I can take a break on the Sabbath. Sabbath required more. And it highlights the importance of keeping the whole Shabbat, not just an hour or two or a couple of hours, but the whole Shabbat, as we are continually drawing near in the Master's presence and soaking ourselves in his presence. And we think of the offerings that were done and the fragrance that must have been around on every day. And then the Sabbaths, there was extra, and the focus that now could be done on these offerings because nobody's out doing their work, but they're focused on Yahweh. And then on the beginning of every month, there was offerings too. This doesn't mean that the new moon is a set-apart day like a prescribed feast day, but it does highlight a marker of timing, that there were extra offerings done on the new moon. And so we understand that, say a new moon even took place on a Sabbath, there would be triple offerings done. So we understand that Yahweh keeps bringing these clear markers so that we can learn to be a counting people. We understand that we are to blow the shofar on the new moon. It's a marker. In Tehillah 81 verse 3, it tells us. And then on the full moon and the day of our festival, the full moons that are being spoken of there are clearly feast times in terms of the beginning of Matzot, 15th of the first month, the beginning of Sukkot, 15th of the 7th month. So we see that highlighting our marker for each month is important. Less people don't even want to look up and see the lights in the sky and then, I don't know where we are and follow pagan-rooted dates. We follow our Master's clock in the sky so that we know when we are to draw near to him, when we are to be a people that are not neglecting the gathering of the set-apart ones. And so we understand the joy that it is to be bringing the correct offerings that are necessity for us in our lives, representative of being a daily living offering, pouring out our lives, being that tribute offering to our Master. It actually, the bottom line comes down to this. You've been bought at a price, you're his. Now show it. And we are to draw near on the new moons. Now, while we certainly gather on the 7th new moon, because that is an official appointed time, and we do come to mark the year together on Rosh Hashanah, the first of the first month, it's not a command for us to have a set apart Sabbath-like day every new moon, but it is commanded to mark that time. So we do acknowledge this is a time, this is where we blow the shofar, this is where we understand the ability of the offerings that were brought on the new moons highlights our focus of our mindset, keeping Yahweh's time. This brings us into clarity. It's not, what month are we in? We should know what we're in because we're accounting people, And then verses 16 to 31 of this chapter goes through Pesach, Matzot, Bikurim, and Shavuot. And in these verses, all the offerings that were being done were, again, a reflection of the joy it is to draw near. All these feast days are prophetic in nature of the work of our Master, which is begun in us and will complete in his one-time sacrifice. Everything here. And then going into chapter 29, looking at Sukkot, all the offerings that were brought at the 7th month, 1st of the 7th month, 10th of the 7th month, and then at Sukkot, and every day, all the bulls and the lambs and the rams that were to be brought. And then on the 8th day, the closing festival. Everything that was done highlights that from the beginning to the end of our walk, we must not neglect the proper worship and fellowship that our Master commands us, in fact, demands of us. So while I'm not going to go into all the details of Yom Kippur, Yom Teruah, I'm going backwards, Yom Teruah, Yom Kippur, Sukkot, or Pesach and Shavuot, or the waving of the sheaf, you can get all that in the notes, and each appointed time that we draw near to, we expand on that. But what we learn as a command given to these people that were now registered was that Yahweh's appointments are important. And that includes every Shabbat. It includes marking for our lives as accounting people every month so that we know where we are at. We know when we are to draw near. We're keeping watch. Shaul writes to the believers in Thessalonica, about the times I do not need to write to you, but watch out because there's a falling away coming. And so we must be a people like Pineḥas who are standing up, not like Zimri who are falling away, singing songs on their own, in a sense, through whoring and corruption. But we're taking a stand, an ardent, zealous, joy-filled stand, ready to put to death anything that is not of Yahweh, and ready to face any persecution that may come for righteousness' sake, because our reward is great in the heavens. And we get to be reminded of this every Shabbat, every day as we meditate on the Torah, and every Shabbat and every feast that we get to gather together, and every month where we are reminded of the clock of Yahweh that we are following, so that we can be accounting people. Any thoughts on these passages before? It is lunchtime, so I think we're going to break for lunch. And if anybody does have anything they'd like to add to what we've been reading, you are welcome to send messages after lunch, either through WhatsApp or through the chat on Twitch. But we are going to look at Eliyahu's example and learn some valuable lessons of what to do and what not to do through the examples of Eliyahu after lunch. On that note, let's pray. Keep your questions and comments for after lunch. How's that? Let's pray. Father, we bless you and we thank you that we can sit here today and go through this powerful Torah portion that reminds us of a people that we are to be ardent for your Torah, ardent for your presence, and ardent for your love over our lives, so that we guard our lives against the corruption and subtlety of compromise that tries to creep into our lives through people that might even be very close to us. We ask you, Master Yahweh, to continue to help us to be reminded of the joy that it is in walking a set-apart life. And that when we look at the nations and we see the corruption that's in the nations and the corruption that's infiltrating many camps within your body, may we be ready to stand up like Pineḥas and put to death any whoring within our camps, so that we can be a people that can have the assurance of your presence because we draw near to you in perfection and in truth of your Torah that sets us apart. We thank you even today as we sit here, we're reminded of the joy that it is to be a daily living offering, to be pouring out our lives as a drink offering before you, to have fellowship with you, with one another in your presence, and celebrating that, having your provision over our lives and giving us your shalom, your perfect shalom, that we can guard as we stay in you, and to celebrate that